There we go. And I'm gonna put us live on Facebook here momentarily.
Okay, can you hear me well enough?
Can, yes. And it's just taking a minute to get us going on the page.
And are you able to see who's logging in then so we know if there's people or not?
Yep, I should be able to see participants on my side here in just a moment. And it looks like we've got a couple of attendees that have joined us. So we're really excited.
Awesome.
All right, it might take a couple minutes for it to get up on the Facebook, but I do want to respect the time of the folks that are joining us as participants and get us started with today's featured speaker. So I'm going to start off with just some opening remarks, and then we're going to move into the story that Melissa McDaniel is going to be sharing with us today. So welcome. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and as such, we are really wanting to highlight the importance of the vulnerability, resiliency, courage, and strength shown by our survivors and victims of sexual assault and relationship violence. And so today we're featuring a story of just that: resiliency, vulnerability, courage, and strength by a survivor and an SCC alumni, Melissa McDaniel. Sexual assault and relationship violence does not discriminate. It can happen to any person at any time. Therefore, it's really important that we work within our community and campus community to spread awareness and understanding of the prevalence of sexual and relationship violence. As members of a campus community, when we become more aware of our campus and community culture, including who sexual and relationship violence affects the most and how to stop it, we'll succeed in helping to create an environment where all students can safely pursue their education and work towards achieving their goals. To introduce myself, my name is Shannon Ketchum. I am the manager of student programs at Spokane Community College. I oversee awareness and prevention education programming at SCC, and I am also a certified Title IX investigator, which means that I receive and investigate complaints of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, gender-related violence, including stalking and intimate partner violence, and protected class discrimination, and harassment and related retaliation. We want today's event to be a learning opportunity for the campus community, and as such, we want to remain respectful and to support the spirit of prevention education and understanding of available resources and services. As a quick disclaimer, we also recognize that today's topic is very sensitive, difficult, and may be triggering for survivors or victims of sexual and relationship violence. We will provide some information during and towards the end of today's conversation regarding campus and community resources for support and advocacy. We're going to begin today's featured speaker with the introduction of our featured speaker. We'd also like the opportunity for our featured speaker to answer any questions from today's participants. If you have a question for our featured guest today, please make sure to type that into the chat or use the raise hand feature, and we will work to address your question as we move through today's event. So starting off with a little bit of a bio, some background on our featured speaker today, Melissa McDaniel. Melissa Ann McDaniel is a best-selling author, advocate, sexual assault survivor, and SCC alum. She uniquely blends the creative and expressive arts, leadership, and love into individualized and group programs for victims of sexual trauma. Melissa Ann holds a Master of Arts degree in holistic leadership with additional training in the creative and expressive arts. She currently is a doctoral student in leadership studies at Gonzaga University. So without further ado, let's turn it over to our featured speaker, Melissa.
Awesome. Is it on me now?
It is.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm actually going to try to share my screen really quickly. Are you able to see that?
Yes, we are, Melissa. Thank you so much.
Right on. So thank you for that great introduction. I'm so excited to be here. What a wild time we're in. I don't know about all of you, but I am definitely eating all the quarantine snacks and hanging out in my pajamas basically every day. So I'm going to dive right in here to Taking Back the Night. And first, we're going to start off. This is what we'll go through today. We're going to start with some ground rules. I start every speech that I do with these ground rules. I'll dive into my story. Then we're going to talk about what it means to be beautifully whole. We'll dive into taking back the night. I will share some resources and apps that I find really helpful. And we'll end with some closing remarks and then a little Q&A. So for our ground rules, the first thing that I like to say is this is a safe space and we each contribute to creating the safe space. And I know that this is a little like odd because we're virtual and not in person, but the reality is this is a safe space and we all contribute whether we're in person or virtually. I think you did a beautiful job, Shannon, of kind of summarizing this, but however you show up today is perfectly okay. And all of you is welcome. And by saying that, that also means however I show up today needs to be perfectly okay. I think sometimes in sharing these vulnerable stories, we forget that the person sharing also has the opportunity to show up however they need to be. And the other thing, there are no wrong questions here. So many times when I share my story and people start to ask questions, they kind of try to dance around and find the right words. And the reality is we're all human. If you have a question, please ask it. And I will be responsible for letting you know if I'm comfortable or not comfortable answering it. And I've had questions from everything from my love life to my family to you name it. So it's open, ask away, and I'll let you know if I feel comfortable or not asking it. So a little bit about me so that you know the lens that I'm coming through. I use she, her pronouns. I'm cisgendered, I'm white, and I'm also a first generation graduate. And I feel like these are really important things to note because this also kind of shares the platform that I'm on right now. And there is a lot of privilege in the platform that I'm on. And I want to make sure that I acknowledge that and also know that in the platform that I'm building right now, I am trying to learn ways to share voices of people of color and those who identify differently than I do. All right. So my story. I was 20 years old. I was a sophomore at Western Washington University. I was out at the park where all the college kids hang out. Everybody's riding bikes and running. And this really handsome guy comes up to me and asks for my number. And given I knew most of the people around me, it seemed safe. The first time I hung out with him was with all of my friends. I wanted to make sure that I was doing the right thing. We hung out a few times individually and things seemed okay. And then one day I got a super bad cold. And this is where the story turns. He came over to my house to make me chicken noodle soup. He brought flowers. He brought a guitar to sing me songs. And in the middle of the night, I had gone to bed and he stayed out in the living room. And when I woke up at around 2 or 3 in the morning, I invited him to come to bed. Not because I wanted to have sex. We had never had sex prior, but I thought it was really odd that he was out there and I was sleeping. He came into bed and he sexually assaulted me. And I remember the flurry of emotions and things happening, but I didn't quite know how to react. I tried pushing him off of me and he told me he was doing it because he loved me. When he finally got off, I went to the bathroom and I cried a few tears and I walked out to the living room, leaving the man who had just assaulted me in the bedroom. He came out to the living room to tell me again that that was love and that's how love is shown, and he was doing that because he loved me. Knowing that that didn't feel right, I went to my bedroom and shut the door, leaving the man in my living room. My response to this isn't my typical feisty Melissa response. Many have assumed that something may have been placed in my soup, but there was no testing done to know. The next morning when I woke up, the man was gone, except for his guitar and the flowers. And I remember trying to decide like what happened. I invited him to bed, so I was 50% to blame, right? It was 50% my fault. And yet that still didn't sit right. But I decided that if I was 50% to blame, then I maybe wasn't raped. So I sent an email. And in it, I stated the blame that I placed on myself and that it was 50% my fault. And then life kind of went on. I told one friend, and a few days had passed, and that friend saw him scoping out the college campus. He was literally riding his bicycle, pulling his sunglasses down to look for what they assumed was me. At that point, I knew I needed to report. I knew that I needed to tell my family. But reporting for me was one more confirmation that I had been assaulted. And telling my family, I knew with every part of my being that they would blame me. I was terrified. When I reported the rape to the police, within a day, I got phone calls from detectives. I had to go down to the police station and look at mugshots. And sure enough, there he was. He had done this before. He had done this to a minor in California and was not supposed to be in Washington State. So I then started asking questions of the detectives, and it turned out that the only truthful thing the man told me was his name. His age, his occupation, his educational background were all lies. Lies to manipulate and groom me. So that being said, I then chose to tell my family. And unfortunately, like I thought I would be, I was met with victim blaming. And did something happen, Shannon?
It looks like the recording might have paused. I'm going to go work on that on the back end. My apologies.
That's okay. Do you want me to keep going?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now I lost where I was. So that being said, this sent them on a hunt to find the man who had raped me. Unfortunately, they were unable to find him, and I had to relocate. For my safety, it just seemed better. I relocated to Spokane, Washington. And because of my concern with the credits and transferring from university to university, I ended up at SCC. And I also, by the family who blamed me for what happened, they also told me not to tell anybody. I was only allowed to talk to counselors and the attorneys, and beyond that, I wasn't allowed to say a word. So none of my new friends knew, nobody at work knew. I had to kind of continue on with life as they were trying to find this man. From there, what happened, I got a phone call from the detective saying, well, we have good news and we have bad news, Melissa. I was like, okay, lay it on me. The good news is we found him. The bad news is we found him because he did it to somebody else. And immediately the guilt and the shame took on a heavier load, because I kept telling myself, if I would have reported sooner, if I would have said something sooner, they would have found him. He wouldn't have been able to do this to somebody else. As the weeks went on, it turned out that they decided not to pursue my case because I did report it a few days later, and they didn't feel that there was enough evidence. I didn't have the rape kit done. But what ended up happening is I had to testify in the other woman's trial as a character witness. This lasted for 3.5 years. So I remember being at SCC in Building 1, sitting on the benches, getting calls from attorneys and trying to figure out how to tell my professors that I didn't do the homework because I'd been on the call prepping for a trial. I would lie to my friends because I wasn't supposed to tell anybody. And I would say that I had homework when I was prepping for the trial. So there was a lot of victim blaming, a lot of blame and shame on myself that happened during this time. And so I'm going to fast forward just a little bit, and then we'll get into more of the healing part of the story. But I guess before I do that, are there any questions about this piece? And I can't see the chat box either.
I'm not seeing any questions come through the chat or through the raise hand feature, so I think we're good.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So for years, I wondered who will love me. As I led this double life, I had this internal life of shame and guilt and hiding that I am a survivor of sexual assault. And also this other life where I tried to mask everything with perfection. If I got one more college degree, if I wrote a book, if I did something that made me feel good about myself, maybe these ugly parts wouldn't be there. And as I watched the hashtag #MeToo start swirling around my social media around 2017, 2018, I was so excited, not because there were so many people that had been hurt, because I felt less alone. But yet, as I saw this hashtag swirling around, I still longed for more. I kept saying, hashtag it happened to me at this age and in this location. But beyond that, it didn't talk about what happened behind closed doors. It didn't share that there were other people like me who would cry on the kitchen floor because the pain of everything was too much to bear. It didn't share things like their struggles to build meaningful relationships. For me, that was the hardest thing. How do I build a meaningful relationship and remain vulnerable when I'm told not to share these things? So I felt like I was being fake. I couldn't be real. In 2018, these words came to me: if you do not see her, be her. I was like, what? I have no idea where they came from. There's no meme running around that says, if you do not see her, be her. But I knew that those words were meant for me and that it was time to step out and share my story of life after sexual assault. But not only just share my story, but to share the healing modalities that have helped me so much to help others. So this came to fruition in 2018. Who Will Love Me, I self-published on Amazon. In 2019, it was picked up by a publisher. And in 2020, this July, the book will be going into bookstores. So now what I'm going to do, if there aren't any questions about this piece, I'm going to move into some of those healing modalities that align with my story. Are there any questions, Shannon?
I am not seeing anything come through chat or through the raise your hand feature. If you do have a question for Melissa, please feel free to enter it into the Zoom chat or raise your hand, and we'll certainly bring you onto the call.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So where things really started to shift for me was when I started studying holistic leadership and this idea of being beautifully whole. So how could I be beautifully whole when I felt so disgusting? I felt so damaged. I felt so unlovable, but yet they're telling me you're beautifully whole just as you are. I'm like, wow, how does this even make sense? You can't be disgusting and beautifully whole. That makes no sense. And then I started diving in more. And I started to create this beautiful box of tools, which is in the book. And the first thing that happened for me was learning to acknowledge with love that sexual assault was affecting my ability to build meaningful relationships. So what does that mean? How do you acknowledge something with love? For me, it meant to learn that the things that I was doing or that disgust that I felt was serving a great purpose in my life. That disgust that I felt kept me away from predators. It kept me away from men that I didn't want to be around, because if I was disgusting and felt disgusting, then I wouldn't want to attract anybody. I didn't have to be vulnerable in relationships because I didn't want to be near them. The next part of that was learning to embrace change. So once I've acknowledged that piece, how do I go on to then embrace change and start living things differently? I think one beautiful thing, When I was in Tanzania, this really helped kind of solidify for me. I met with a spiritual healer, and he says to me, Melissa, you're like this flower, and all of these bees are trying to get to your pollen, and you don't know how to differentiate between the good and the bad people. And you don't know how to differentiate between trying to give, and hold those boundaries. And he says to me, how are you going to change the color of your flower? I went, I don't know. So then I moved to Greece, and I'm hiking up this hill in Greece one day thinking about the spiritual healer. And it comes to mind that my name in Greek actually means honeybee. And I had this little like ping. What if this honeybee learns to love herself? Then the color of her flower will change. And that's absolutely what started to happen. As soon as I acknowledged with love that these things were happening, that I was struggling to build meaningful relationships, I was then able to recognize it was time to embrace change and move forward. So in studying holistic leadership, I really dove into our mind, our body, and our spirit. And something that I thought was so cool was that, did you know how brilliant your mind is and the way that it develops your thought processes and things that are serving you? So something for me that I used to use were these comedic conversations, because I didn't want to have to get too vulnerable with people. I grew up in the country and took pigs to the county fair. So I always had a conversation ready if things started to get too deep, to derail the conversation and bring us up to laughter. And although that wasn't or isn't serving me now because it wasn't letting me connect vulnerably to people, my goodness, was it serving me then? I think my connection to spirit, something that people don't talk about often, is spiritual trauma. And something that had happened to me through the legal process is that his pastor actually paid for an attorney to appeal the legal process. Originally, he was sentenced 12 years to life. And through that, I really struggled to find any meaning or purpose in religion and spirituality. And learning that spirit is such a big piece of who we are helped me begin to heal in different ways. Connecting to spirit for me has come in the form of intentionally walking out in nature, meditation, a lot of guided meditation. The other thing, your rockin' body. Your body holds so much information. And when we're using words like it's so disgusting and it's so stupid and I'm so damaged, that hurts. Your body is so brilliant and can communicate in ways that your mind can't. And that for me was extremely healing, and learning to communicate with my body and knowing that if I am triggered and something's happening in my body, I don't necessarily have to have the words to articulate it. It's okay to have a feeling in my body and feel triggered and communicate in that capacity versus needing the words to articulate. Are there any questions on that part before I move forward? No? All right, taking back the night. So I'm a big believer in the idea that hurt people. And in times in my life where I was extremely hurting, I hurt people. Not intentionally, but I know in that trying to build relationships with people and that lack of vulnerability, it really affected it. And I think this quote, "No one should fear the night or the day. Shatter the silence, stop the violence," from Take Back the Night, is so powerful. Because if you look at the statistics of sexual assault survivors across the board, we're everywhere. And you think of all of those hurt people that are walking around scared and feel fearful day or night. The more that we start speaking up and sharing our stories and shattering the silence to stop the violence, the more healing that's going to happen on a collective level. I truly believe the more healing we do on an individual level, the more we're able to step out and shatter the silence and stop the violence. These resources here are some that I find extremely helpful. I don't know if you've heard of the Safe Squad app. It's easily downloadable. It's on Apple and everywhere, but it notifies your family and friends, etc., of your location. The Up is phenomenal. You can anonymously connect with survivors and support. And Me Too Many Voices. Currently, she's hosting workshops and resources via Instagram Live and Zoom. Each of these have been founded by women who are sexual assault survivors, and they're doing incredible work out in the world. All right, are there any questions? I feel like I breezed through.
I am not seeing any questions come in at this time through the chat or through the raise your hand feature. I certainly would like to say, just on behalf of SCC Cares and Spokane Community College, we genuinely and wholeheartedly appreciate you sharing your story today. I know that takes a lot of courage and a lot of vulnerability to be able to speak out to your experience. And we certainly want to encourage folks to check out the Who Will Love Me, a holistic approach to building meaningful relationships after sexual assault text that you wrote. And you said that's coming out into bookstores when, Melissa?
Coming in bookstores July 28th.
Wonderful.
And I also have some advanced reader copies, and I think that are you doing something with them?
Yes, so we are going to be, for those that were able to participate today through the Zoom, or looks like we had some technical difficulties with the Facebook live stream. And so we are going to be posting the video recording of today's conversation on our Facebook here today. If you are interested in an advanced reader copy, certainly let us know. We have a few copies we have available, and then we're going to be doing some hashtag SAM for Sexual Assault Awareness Month prize packs. So we'll be doing a drawing for participants in today's meeting. And I'm going to be posting a quick link. If you can provide us with any feedback on today's session, we would love to hear your feedback on today's event and any events like this that you would want to see on campus. So you'll see that entering into the chat here momentarily. I did see a note come in through the chat, Melissa, from one of our participants, Melissa McDaniel. She said, not a question. She wanted to say thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you. And when things are less COVID-like and more open, I would love to come in and share. I think I will be donating a few copies of the book to the library as well when that is accessible through my publisher. So I would love to come in and share some of that with you all in person.
Absolutely, and we would love to have you back to be able to speak to our campus community and to the CCS district as a whole. So again, thank you. I'm going to turn back on my video. Thank you for taking the opportunity to chat with us today. And again, just the courage and the hope and healing that you offered through just sharing your story today. I think it was a really meaningful conversation, and I think it's going to make an impact with our students and with our campus community. So thank you. Again, don't forget, check out, oh, you can't see it in the screen right now. Check out Who Will Love Me. I have my advanced reader copy right here. So I'm really excited to dive into that and be able to learn again a little bit more about your story. Any parting words, any final words that you would want to share with those members of our campus community that may have their own experience with this trauma? Any words of healing or hope you would want to offer?
I think, you know, something that took me a long time to learn is the kindness and love for self. But I also think that many times the idea is shared that you are not lovable until you love yourself. And I want to be very clear that that is not the message here, and that you are beautifully whole just as you are, lovable just as you are. It doesn't take you fully diving in and doing all of the self-love work for you to be lovable. I think too, to be really kind to yourself today. I know I went through this really fast. It's very different virtually. But hearing these stories can sometimes, they may not bring something up for you in the moment, but might bring something up later on in the day or even tomorrow. Feel free to email me if something comes up, if you need some additional support. Also, the apps and resources that I posted, they're phenomenal supports as well.
Absolutely, and we're having difficulty with the share screen feature on my end. I was going to bring up a few of our SCC specific and community resources. So for those of you that may be interested in receiving a copy of that electronically, with our links to our campus resources and community resources to support survivors and victims of sexual assault or relationship violence, we certainly want to be able to share that information. I know you were mentioning a few different apps earlier, Melissa. Another one that's been developed through End Violence Against Women International and has been implemented in Spokane County is Victim Link. That offers opportunity for not only advocacy and confidential reporting, but more information on resources, legal counseling, and so on. So we'll certainly be planning to send out some of that information as well. And I appreciate that parting message about just being beautifully whole and understanding this is a process. Again, just thank you. From the bottom of my heart. I think especially having been part of our SCC community as an alumni, as a former staff member, and now really being able to spread the message of your story and hopefully help others work towards healing. We're very grateful to be able to have you here today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. It's fun to be back and I miss everybody.
We miss everybody too. So
I bet you do.
Understanding again in this time of COVID as well, isolation and the inability to continue to build on those connections can be a vicarious trauma in this time as well. And we recognize for those individuals that may be experiencing relationship violence or maybe experiencing sexual assault during this period of COVID, we want them to know that you're not alone. We want you to know as a part of the community, you're not alone. You are enough. You are wholeheartedly beautiful, and we are here to support you in whatever way we can. So I think that you helped really speak to that message perfectly by sharing your story today.
Well, thank you. Do you want me to stay on after you close out, or do you want me to?
Well, let's open it up. I think there's a few more participants that are still on, either by video or phone. Are there any questions or comments that you would like to offer for those of you that are on the call? Either through raise your hand or chat.
All of this tech stuff is so cool that we even have the ability to do this.
It's a learning curve. I'll certainly say that. We just got a message in from Adam Fouth. It says, "Thank you. I love the quote. If you do not see her, be her." I think that is a very impactful message.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I have looked everywhere for that quote, and I have just decided that I'm owning it because I don't know where it came from. But well, as soon as those, right, I'm owning that. But as soon as those words came, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't be her. I don't want to be her. And I really wrestled around with that for 6 months as to whether or not I should step out and share my story. And when the hashtag Me Too was really going around and people were sharing their stories, I couldn't even say hashtag Me Too because I was so caught up in this idea that nobody could know what happened to me that would disrupt everything that I am and everybody's perception of me. So when those words came, I was like, oh no. But here we are. It's a big fat yes. And we're moving forward to support people.
That is wonderful. And I think your words are going to make a difference to a lot of people.
Thank you. I hope so. It's a very lonely feeling. Very lonely. So.
Well, I think that's going to wrap up our session today. Certainly, do you mind putting back up, if you can, your contact
Yeah, no
information?
problem.
A couple of folks that are still in on the call. I think we have somebody joining us by phone, so I want to be able to read those that contact off. If you would like any additional information, either on Melissa's book or resources, her email is melissa@lovemelissaann.com. And you can follow her at melissa.ann.mcdaniel. I'm assuming that's on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, it should be for both.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, we appreciate everybody that was able to join us today, jumping in on the conversation. And certainly we hope that you'll continue to join us as we have some additional conversations this week. Friendly, shameless plug, tomorrow we're going to be having a featured resources hour featuring End Violence Against Women International and Lutheran Community Services Northwest, which are two of the premier organizations serving sexual and relationship violence victims and survivors in the greater Spokane area. And that's going to be at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. So we hope some folks jump in for that as well. All right, awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.